Captain Jake Morrison sat in his chair on the bridge of Frontier Watch Station. The coffee in his cup had gone cold an hour ago, but he kept sipping it anyway. Outside the thick windows, stars sparkled in the endless black of space. This was the edge of human territory, the last stop before the unknown. "Captain, I'm getting something strange on the sensors," said Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez from her station. She was the best communications officer Jake had ever worked with. Her fingers moved quickly over the controls as she tried to make sense of what she was seeing. "What kind of strange?" Jake asked, setting down his cup. In his 20 years of service, he had learned that strange usually meant trouble. "Energy readings, sir. Big ones. Coming from the direction of the Vega system." Amy's voice was steady, but Jake could hear the worry underneath. "I've never seen anything like this before." Jake stood up and walked over to her station. The screen showed waves of energy moving through space at incredible speed. The readings were off the charts. "Are you sure the sensors are working right?" "I've checked them 3 times, sir. Everything is working perfectly." Amy looked up at Ian, him with wide eyes. "Whatever is coming our way, it's huge." "Sound General Alert," Jake ordered. "Get me a connection to Earth Command." The warning lights began flashing red throughout the station. Other crew members hurried to their posts. Jake had trained them well, and they moved without panic even though they all knew something big was happening. "Sir, I'm trying to reach Earth Command, but there's some kind of interference," reported communications specialist Tom Parker from across the bridge. "A signal keeps cutting out." "Keep trying," Jake said. He turned back to Amy. "How long until whatever it is gets here?" Amy checked her instruments again. "At current speed, maybe 10 minutes, sir." 10 minutes. Jake felt his heart rate increase. In his career, he had dealt with pirates, equipment failures, and natural disasters. But this felt different. This felt like something that would change everything. "Captain," shouted sensor operator Lisa Chun from her post. "I'm seeing ships. Lots of them." Jake rushed to the main display screen. What he saw made his blood run cold. Massive shapes were dropping out of hyperspace, one after another. They were bigger than anything humans had ever built. Some looked like they were made of crystal, catching and reflecting the light of nearby stars. Others appeared to be metal, but with strange curves and angles that hurt to look at. "How many?" Jake asked quietly. "Still counting, sir." "At least 100, maybe more." Lisa's voice was barely a whisper. The ships arranged themselves in a perfect formation. They moved with purpose, like they had done this many times before. Jake realized with growing horror that they were surrounding human space. This wasn't random. This was planned. "Sir, I'm getting a transmission," Amy announced. "It's coming. From the lead ship. They're broadcasting on all frequencies." "Put it on the main screen," Jake ordered. The display flickered, then showed a face that would haunt Jake's dreams for years to come. The creature was reptilian, with scales that seemed to shift color in the light. Its eyes were completely black, and when it spoke, Jake could see rows of sharp teeth. "Greetings, humans," the creature said in perfect English. "I am Supreme Commander Zeth Kalar of the Dominion Empire. Your species has expanded far enough. Your time of independence is over." Jake felt the blood drain from his face. Around the bridge, his crew stood frozen, staring at the screen. "You have 72 hours to surrender all your colonies and dismantle your military forces," Zeth Kalar continued. "You will submit to Dominion rule. Your leaders will report to our ships for processing. Any resistance will be met with complete annihilation." The screen changed to show images that made Jake's stomach turn. Burning cities, destroyed ships, bodies floating in space, planet after planet reduced to ash and rubble. "This is what happened to the last 12 species that refused our generous offer," Zeth Kalar said, his voice filled with cruel amusement. They thought they could resist. They were wrong. You have seen our fleet. You know you cannot win. Choose wisely. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in complete silence. Sir, Amy said softly, they're broadcasting the same message to every human colony and ship in space. Everyone is seeing this. Jake tried to think. His training had prepared him for many things, but not for this. How do you fight ships that big? How do you protect billions of people from creatures that had already destroyed 12 other civilizations? Get me that connection to Earth Command, he said finally. Use emergency frequencies if you have to. Already trying, sir, Tom replied. But the interference is getting stronger. Jake looked out at the alien fleet again. They weren't moving closer, but they didn't need to. Their message was clear. Submit or die. It was the oldest threat in the universe, and it usually worked. Captain, Lisa said, I'm picking up movement from the inner colonies. Ships are heading toward Earth. Military ships? Jake asked. Some, sir, but also civilian vessels. Cargo ships, passenger liners, even mining platforms. Everyone is running. Jake nodded. It made sense. When faced with overwhelming force, the natural response was to run. But where could humanity run to? The alien fleet was everywhere. Sir, I'm getting scattered reports from other stations, Amy reported. Some colony governors are already talking about surrender. They're scared. Jake didn't blame them. He was scared too. But something bothered him about the whole situation. Why give humans 72 hours? Why not just attack immediately? In his experience, when someone gave you time to think, it usually meant they wanted something specific. Keep monitoring all frequencies, he ordered. I want to know what Earth. Command says when they finally respond. As the hours passed, Jake watched the alien fleet maintain its perfect formation. They were patient, confident. They had done this before, and they knew how it would end. But Jake had spent his entire career on the frontier, dealing with the unexpected. He had learned to look for things that didn't fit, patterns that seemed wrong. And something about this situation felt off. The aliens were powerful, yes. Their ships were impressive. But they were also showing off, making sure humans saw their strength. In Jake's experience, truly confident predators didn't need to prove anything. Maybe, just maybe, there was more to this story than met the eye. President Lisa Turner walked quickly through the halls of the White House. Her security team struggled to keep up as she headed toward the emergency meeting room. The alien ultimatum had reached Earth 3 hours ago, and the world was in chaos. Madam, President, said her chief of staff, running beside her, the phone hasn't stopped ringing. Every world leader wants to talk. The stock markets have crashed. People are panicking in the streets. Lisa nodded, but didn't slow down. She had been preparing for this moment her entire political career, though she had hoped it would never come. The emergency meeting room was already full when she arrived. Admiral Tony Blake, head of the Human Defense Force, stood at the front of the room with a grim expression. Behind him, a large screen showed the alien fleet positions around human space. The dots representing enemy ships outnumbered human forces by an impossible margin. Give me the numbers, Admiral, Lisa said as she took her seat. It's not good, Madam President, Tony replied. Our best estimates put their fleet at over 3,000 ships. We have maybe 50 vessels that could be called true warships. In a straight fight, we would last maybe 10 minutes. Senator Carl White, a thin man with gray hair, spoke up from across the table. Then we have to surrender. We can't fight them. It would be suicide. Surrender? General Patricia Davis slammed her hand on the table. We didn't build this civilization just to hand it over to the first alien bully that shows up. We fight. We make them pay for every inch. With what? Carl shot back. You heard the Admiral. We're outnumbered 60-1. Fighting them would be sending our people to die for nothing. Lisa listened to the argument, but kept her attention on the screen. The alien ships were positioned perfectly to cut off escape routes from every major human colony. It was professional work, the kind that came from experience. What about evacuation? Asked Secretary of Defense Mark Johnson. We could move the population to the outer colonies, maybe buy some time. Time for what? Tony asked. They can follow us anywhere we go. These ships are faster than ours, and they have better weapons. There's nowhere to run. Lisa watched the debate continue, but her mind was elsewhere. During the alien broadcast, she had noticed something that the others had missed. A small symbol in the corner of the transmission, barely visible unless you knew what to look for. I need to speak with Dr. Kevin Ross, she said suddenly. The room fell silent. Most of the people there didn't know who Dr. Ross was, and that was exactly how it was supposed to be. Madam President, her chief of staff said quietly, Dr. Ross is in the secure facility. It would take time to arrange a meeting. Then arrange it. Now. Lisa stood up. I want everyone to continue working on evacuation plans and defensive strategies. But nobody makes any decisions until I get back. 30 minutes later, Lisa sat in a small, windowless room deep beneath the White House. Dr. Kevin Ross entered carrying a sealed briefcase. He was a small man with kind eyes, the sort of person you might pass on the street without noticing. But Lisa knew he was one of the most important people on Earth. You saw the symbol, Kevin said as he sat down. It wasn't a question. I saw it. How long do we have? Kevin opened his briefcase and pulled out a tablet. The final preparations were completed last month. We've been ready for this moment for 15 years. And the other installations? All of them. Mars, Europa, Titan, even the mining stations in the asteroid belt. Every human facility has been upgraded according to the protocols. The civilians don't know, of course. They think they're living normal lives. Lisa felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Then we can actually do this? We can do more than that, Kevin said with a small smile. We can win. Meanwhile, across human space, the reaction to the alien ultimatum was not what the Dominion had expected. On New Sydney, the largest human colony outside Earth, news reporter Helen Carter stood in the main square interviewing citizens. I have to ask, Helen said to a middle-aged woman pushing a stroller. Aren't you worried about the alien threat? The woman laughed. Worried? Honey, my grandfather lived through the food riots of 2301. My mother survived the asteroid strike on Ceres. Humans have been dealing with impossible situations for centuries. This is just another Tuesday. At a nearby cafe, construction worker Bill Murphy was having lunch with his friends. They were discussing the alien ultimatum like it was a weather report. You know what I think? Bill said, taking a bite of his sandwich. I think these lizard guys have never dealt with humans before. They're in for a surprise. What do you mean? Asked his friend Steve. Well, they gave us 72 hours, right? If they really wanted to wipe us out, why wait? Either they're not as tough as they want us to think, or they want something other than our destruction. On Earth, similar conversations were happening in every major city. While some people panicked, most seemed strangely calm. Children played in parks while their parents watched the news with interest rather than terror. In a small town in Kansas, retired soldier Frank Cooper was working in his garden when his neighbor approached. Frank, did you see the news? Those aliens are demanding we surrender. Frank looked up from his tomatoes. I saw it, Joe. Interesting timing. What do you mean? Frank smiled. Oh, nothing. Just that it's been a while since humanity had a good challenge. We've been getting soft. Back in the White House, Lisa returned to the meeting room. The argument was still going on, but now other voices had joined in. Colony governors were calling in, some demanding immediate surrender, others wanting to fight. "Madam President," Admiral Blake said when she entered, "we're getting reports from the outer colonies. Several governors are already drafting surrender." "Documents, are they?" Lisa asked calmly. Double quotes, "Yes, ma'am. They're scared, and honestly, I can't blame them. We're facing extinction here." Lisa walked to the head of the table and looked around the room. These were good people, patriots who had dedicated their lives to protecting humanity. But they didn't know the whole story. "What if I told you that we've been preparing for this exact situation for decades?" she said quietly. The room fell silent again. "What if I told you that every human installation in space has capabilities that even you don't know about?" "Admiral," Blake frowned. "Ma'am, I'm the head of the Defense Force. I know about every military installation we have." "No, Admiral. You know about the ones we wanted you to know about." Lisa activated a hidden control panel, and the room's screens changed. Instead of showing the alien fleet, they now displayed technical diagrams of human installations. But these weren't the peaceful colonies and stations everyone knew about. These were weapons platforms, shield generators, and defensive systems beyond anything they had imagined. "Ladies and gentlemen," Lisa said, "let me tell you about Project Prometheus." The room stared in stunned silence as the truth was revealed. Every human colony, every space station, every mining platform had been built with hidden capabilities. The peaceful expansion of humanity had been a careful deception, preparing for the day when they would need to defend themselves. "How long?" Admiral Blake asked in a whisper. "Since first contact protocols were established," Lisa replied. "We always knew this day would come, and we've been ready for it." Senator White looked pale. "But the cost, the resources. How did you hide all this?" "Because everyone did their job," Lisa said. "The miners thought they were mining. The colonists thought they were farming. The engineers thought they were building habitats. And they were. But they were also building something else." Lisa looked around the room at the faces of her advisors. Fear was being replaced by something else. Hope. "So what's our response to the ultimatum?" General Davis asked. Lisa smiled for the first time that day. "We're going to tell them exactly what we think of their threat." The 72 hours were almost up. Across human space, people gathered around screens to watch what might be their last moment of freedom. On the bridge of Frontier Watch Station, Captain Jake Morrison stood with his crew, waiting for Earth's response to the alien ultimatum. Supreme Commander Jeth Kalar sat in his command chair aboard the massive Dominion flagship. His black eyes stared at the tactical display showing human space. Soon, another species would join the 12 others who had learned the price of defying the Dominion Empire. "Commander," his second-in-command said, "we are receiving a transmission from the human homeworld." "Put it on the main screen," Zeth Kalar ordered. "Let's see how they beg for mercy." The screen flickered to life, showing the interior of what appeared to be a human government building. A woman in a simple blue suit stood behind a wooden desk. She looked calm, almost relaxed. This was not the terrified leader Zeth Kalar had expected to see. "I am President Lisa Turner of the United Human Colonies," she began, her voice steady and clear. "We have received your ultimatum and considered it carefully." Zeth Kalar leaned forward. Finally, the surrender would come. It always did. President Turner looked directly into the camera, and for a moment, Zeth Kalar could have sworn she was looking right at him. Then she smiled and spoke 3 words that would echo through history. "That's pretty cute." The transmission ended. Zeth Kalar stared at the blank screen in confusion. Around the bridge, his officers looked at each other uncertainly. In all their conquests, no species had ever responded like this. "Sir?" his communications officer said hesitantly. Should we ask for clarification? No, Zeth Kalar snarled. They mock us. They will learn the price of such arrogance. Order the fleet to begin the demonstration bombardment of their outer colonies. On Earth, President Turner walked calmly from the recording studio. Her chief of staff hurried to catch up. Ma'am, the alien commander is probably going to be very angry. I'm counting on it, Lisa replied. Angry enemies make mistakes. Back on Frontier Watch, Captain Jake felt a strange sense of pride. Whatever happened? Next, humanity had refused to go quietly. Amy Rodriguez turned from her station with a puzzled expression. Captain, I'm getting strange readings from the inner system. Energy signatures are spiking all over the place. Jake looked at the sensor display. All across human space, installations that had been quiet for decades were suddenly coming online. What's happening? I don't know, sir. But it's like the entire human fleet just woke up. On the Dominion flagship, Zeth Kalar watched as his ships moved into attack formation. The human colonies on Mars would be destroyed first, as an example. Then the rest would follow. Sir, his sensor officer called out, I'm detecting energy. Fluctuations from the human positions? Weapons charging? Zeth Kalar asked. No, sir, something else. I've never seen readings like this before. Zeth Kalar felt the first touch of unease. In his experience, confident species didn't respond to ultimatums with jokes. They either surrendered or fought back immediately. The humans were doing neither. Begin the bombardment, he ordered. The massive Dominion ships began charging there. Weapons. Energy built up in crystalline arrays that had reduced entire cities to dust. The weapons that had conquered 12 civilizations prepared to claim their 13th. But as the first shots fired, something impossible happened. The space around the human installations began to shimmer. What had appeared to be simple mining. Platforms suddenly sprouted massive shield generators. Peaceful research stations revealed hidden weapon arrays. Even small cargo ships seemed to unfold like flowers, showing gun ports and missile launchers. What is this? Shif Kalar demanded. The Dominion bombardment struck the human shields and simply disappeared. The energy weapons that had destroyed. Planets barely made the shields flicker. On the bridge of what had appeared to be a simple cargo vessel, Captain Ben Wright smiled as his ship completed its transformation. The hull panels had retracted, revealing a sleek warship underneath. All stations report ready, his tactical officer announced. Then let's show our guests what human hospitality looks like, Ben said. Across human space, the same scene played out hundreds of times. Mining stations revealed themselves as weapon platforms. Colony ships shed their disguises to become battleships. Even the smallest human installations suddenly bristled with defensive systems. Captain Jake Morrison watched in amazement as his own station transformed around him. Walls retracted to reveal command centers he had never seen before. New crew. Members appeared from hidden sections, taking positions at weapons controls that hadn't existed moments before. Captain, Amy said, her voice filled with wonder. I'm receiving new orders. We're the Terra Shield now, and we're not alone. On the main screen, Jake could see other human installations revealing their true nature. The peaceful edge of human. Space had become a fortress line that stretched across the galaxy. Commander Lisa Johnson stood on the bridge of what had been listed as a simple colony transport. Now it was revealed as the heavy cruiser Human Pride, bristling with weapons designed specifically to counter Dominion technology. Target their command ship, she ordered. Let's see how they like our response. The Human Pride fired a concentrated electromagnetic pulse designed from studying Dominion technology. The energy beam struck the massive alien flagship, and every light on its hull flickered. Impossible. Zeth Kalar breathed as his ship's systems began failing. How did they know about our crystalline matrix weakness? His answer came from an unexpected source. The human communication channels, which had been silent moments before, suddenly filled with a voice he recognized. "Hello, Commander Zeth Kalar," said Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez, though her voice now carried the authority of someone much higher ranking. "Or should I say, Supreme Commander? We've been watching you for a very long time." "You're just a communications officer," Zeth Kalar snarled. "No, I'm Commander Amy Rodriguez of the Human Intelligence Corps, and I've been studying your species for 15 years. We know everything about your ships, your weapons, and your tactics." Around the Dominion fleet, human ships moved with perfect coordination. They weren't fighting desperately, like the 12 species that had fallen before. They were executing. A carefully planned military operation. Captain Morrison found himself commanding weapons he had never seen before, but somehow knew how to use. His crew worked with the efficiency of trained warriors, not the frightened civilians they had pretended to be. "Sir," his new tactical officer reported, "the fleet is reporting successful hits on 70% of enemy vessels. Their shields are failing." Jake looked at the tactical display. The massive Dominion fleet that had seemed so invincible was falling apart. Human ships darted between the larger alien vessels, targeting specific weak points with surgical precision. "How did we know where to hit them?" Jake asked. "Because we've been preparing for this specific enemy for decades," Amy replied. "Every piece of debris from their previous conquests was studied. Every signal was analyzed. We know their technology better than they do." On his failing flagship, Zeth Kalar watched his fleet being systematically destroyed. This wasn't possible. 12 species had fallen before his might. How could these humans, who had seemed so weak, be defeating him? "Sir," his second-in-command said, "we're receiving surrender terms from the humans." "Surrender terms?" Zeth Kalar couldn't believe what he was hearing. "They're offering us surrender terms." The main screen activated again, showing President Turner. She was sitting in what appeared to be a military command center, surrounded by displays showing the battle. "Commander Zeth Kalar," she said politely, "your fleet is defeated. We offer you the chance to withdraw with your remaining ships. This is our only offer." Zeth Kalar looked at his tactical display. Of his 3,000 ships, less than half remained functional. The humans hadn't just defeated him, they had crushed him with the same casual efficiency they had shown in their 3-word response. "How?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. President Turner smiled the same calm smile she had worn when delivering her response to his ultimatum. "We told you it was pretty cute," she said. "We meant it." The battle was over, but the explanations were just beginning. Supreme Commander Zeth Kalar sat in his damaged command chair, staring at the human fleet that surrounded his broken forces. His scales had turned a pale gray, the color of defeat. Among his people, Dr. Kevin Ross appeared on the main screen of the Dominion flagship. The small, quiet man looked nothing like a warrior, but Zeth Kalar now understood that appearances meant nothing when dealing with humans. "Commander," Dr. Ross said politely, "I thought you might want to understand what just happened to you." "You defeated us," Zeth Kalar said bitterly. "What more is there to understand?" "Everything," Dr. Ross replied. "You see, we've been preparing for this meeting for over a century. Not just preparing to fight you, but preparing to fight you specifically." On the bridge of the Terra Shield, Captain Jake Morrison listened to the conversation with growing amazement. Amy Rodriguez, who he now knew was actually a high-ranking intelligence officer, was explaining things he had never imagined. Every human installation in space was built with dual purposes, Amy said. The mining equipment on asteroid stations were actually mass drivers capable of accelerating projectiles to incredible speeds. The power plants that ran our colonies were designed to channel energy into weapon systems. Even the agricultural domes could be converted into shield generators. Jake looked around his bridge. The peaceful monitoring station he had commanded for years was now revealed as a fortress bristling with weapons. But how did you hide all this from us? Because you didn't need to know, Amy explained. Every human in space was doing their real job. The miners really were mining. The farmers really were farming. The engineers really were building habitats. But they were also, without knowing it, building a military machine. On the Human Pride, Commander Lisa Johnson was coordinating the surrender of Dominion forces. Her ship's computers were analyzing the alien technology, adding to decades of collected intelligence. The beautiful thing, she said to her crew, is that they made it easy for us. Every time they conquered a species, they left debris behind. Every signal they sent was intercepted and studied. We've been building our defenses based on their own technology. Back on the Dominion flagship, Dr. Ross continued his explanation. You made several mistakes, Commander. The first was assuming that a species that seemed peaceful was actually weak. Your outer colonies showed no defenses, Seth Kalar protested. Your ships were clearly civilian vessels. They were civilian vessels, Dr. Ross agreed. But they were also military vessels. We learned long ago that the best camouflage is the truth. A mining ship that actually mines ore makes a perfect disguise for a weapons platform. On Earth, President, Turner was receiving reports from across human space. The Dominion fleet was surrendering in sections, their ships crippled, but their crews alive. It was exactly as planned. Ma'am, Admiral Blake said, still struggling to understand what had happened. The outer colonies are reporting complete success. Enemy forces are surrendering faster than we can process them. Good, Lisa replied. Begin Phase 2. Phase 2 involved something the Dominion had never expected. Human ships began broadcasting on all frequencies throughout the galaxy, not just to their own forces, but to every inhabited system within range. The message was simple but powerful. It showed the Dominion fleet's defeat and included a detailed explanation of how it had been accomplished. But more importantly, it revealed the truth about the 12 species the Dominion had supposedly conquered. Colonel Ryan Murphy, head of the Deep Space Intelligence Division, had been working in secret throughout Dominion space for years. His agents had been supporting resistance movements on conquered worlds, providing them with weapons and intelligence. The Dominion Empire is not as strong as they want you to believe, Ryan's message said. Their conquered worlds are in constant rebellion. Their supply lines are stretched thin. And now their main fleet has been defeated by a species they thought was weak. On the occupied world of Kepler 442b, former home of the Zephyrian species, hidden receivers picked up the human transmission. In underground bunkers, Zephyrian resistance fighters watched the destruction of the Dominion fleet with growing hope. Is this real? Asked Zara, a young Zephyrian who had never known freedom. Have the humans really defeated them? It's real, replied Elder Voss, who remembered the conquest of his world. And if the humans can defeat them, so can we. Across 12 star systems, the same scene played out. Species that had been crushed by Dominion might suddenly realize that their oppressors were not invincible. The human victory had become a signal for galaxy-wide rebellion. Back on the Dominion flagship, Seth Kalar was beginning to understand the full scope of what had happened to him. The humans hadn't just defeated his fleet, they had destroyed his entire empire's reputation. You planned this, he said to Dr. Ross. All of it. We planned for every possibility, Dr. Ross confirmed. We knew that defeating you militarily would only solve part of the problem. We needed to show the galaxy that the Dominion could be beaten. Amy Rodriguez took over the explanation. For decades, we've been building a network of contacts throughout your empire. We've been supporting resistance movements, providing intelligence and preparing for this moment. But why? Zeth Kalar asked. Why go to such lengths? Because, President Turner said, appearing on the screen, bullies need to be stopped. And the best way to stop a bully is to show everyone that they're not as tough as they pretend to be. Captain Morrison was finally beginning to understand the full scope of what humanity had accomplished. They hadn't just built a military force. They had built a liberation movement. Sir, his communications officer reported, we're receiving messages from across the galaxy. Resistance movements on Dominion worlds are launching coordinated attacks. The Empire is collapsing. On the bridge of the human pride, Commander Johnson was watching the same reports. It's working, she said with satisfaction. The Dominion's own conquered worlds are turning against them. The tactical display showed Dominion forces throughout the galaxy, either surrendering or being attacked by their own former victims. Empire that had seemed so powerful was crumbling from within. How long have you been planning this? Zeth Kalar asked, his voice hollow. Since the first time we detected your expansion, Dr. Ross replied. We knew that eventually you would come for us. So we prepared. We watched. We learned. And we made sure that when the time came, we would be ready. President Turner appeared on the screen again. The offer still stands, Commander. Withdraw your remaining forces and return to your home system. The conquered worlds will be free to choose their own fate. Zeth Kalar looked at his tactical display. His fleet was broken, his empire was in rebellion, and his reputation was destroyed. The humans had given him exactly what he had demanded. From them, complete surrender. I accept your terms, he said finally. Good, President Turner replied. But understand this. If the Dominion Empire ever threatens another species again, we will be watching. And next time, we won't be so merciful. As the remaining Dominion ships began their retreat, Captain Morrison looked out at the stars. The galaxy was changing, and humanity had become the catalyst for that change. What happens now? He asked Amy. Now, she said with a smile, we get back to work. There's a lot of cleaning up to do. 6 months had passed since the Dominion fleet limped back to their home system. The galaxy was a very different place now. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the newly renamed Terror Shield, watching construction crews work on the latest addition to the station. Hard to believe it's been half a year, Amy Rodriguez said, joining him at the window. She still worked as his communications officer, though everyone now knew her real job. Sometimes I wake up thinking, it was all a dream, Jake replied. And I see those new weapon arrays and remember that nothing will ever be the same. The Terror Shield was no longer pretending to be a simple monitoring station. It had become the first openly military installation on the human frontier, a symbol of humanity's new role in the galaxy. Sir, came a voice from behind them. We're receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian delegation. Jake turned to see Lieutenant Tom Parker, who had also revealed himself to be more than he appeared. The young man was actually a trained diplomat, prepared for exactly this kind of situation. Put them through to the main conference room, Jake said, and send word to Earth. President Turner will want to hear this. The conference room had been another hidden feature of the station. What had appeared to be a simple meeting space was actually a sophisticated diplomatic facility, complete with translation equipment and security systems. The main screen showed a group of tall, blue-skinned beings with large eyes and graceful movements. These were the Zephyrians, one of the 12 species that had been conquered by the Dominion. Now they were free, and they wanted to talk. Captain Morrison, said the lead Zephyrian, I am Ambassador Kethara. We come to offer our thanks and to discuss the future. Jake had gotten used to these meetings. Over the past 6 months, representatives from all 12 former Dominion worlds had come to meet with humanity. Some wanted to form alliances. Others simply wanted to express their gratitude. All of them were amazed by what humans had accomplished. "Ambassador," Jake replied, "we're honored by your visit. How can we help you?" "We wish to join the growing alliance," Cathara said. "Our people have voted unanimously to request membership in what your media calls the Liberation Coalition." Jake smiled. The Liberation Coalition had been President Turner's idea. Instead of creating a human empire to replace the Dominion, they had formed a voluntary alliance of free species. Each world governed itself, but they shared resources and protection. "We'll be happy to forward your request to the Coalition Council," Jake said, "though I should warn you, the application process involves a lot of paperwork." Cathara laughed, a sound like wind chimes. "After centuries of Dominion rule, paperwork sounds wonderful." On Earth, President Turner was dealing with her own diplomatic challenges. The presidential office had been expanded to include a new wing dedicated to interstellar relations. She was currently meeting with Admiral Blake and Dr. Ross to discuss the latest intelligence reports. "The Dominion home system is completely sealed off," Admiral Blake reported. "No ships in or out. We think they're dealing with internal problems." "What kind of problems?" Turner asked. Dr. Ross consulted his tablet. "According to our agents, the defeat has caused a political crisis. The military leadership is being blamed for the disaster. There's talk of civil war." "Should we be concerned?" Turner asked. "Not immediately," Dr. Ross replied. "But we're monitoring the situation. If the Dominion government collapses completely, we need to be ready to deal with whatever comes next." Meanwhile, on the former Dominion world of Kepler 442b, the Zephyrian resistance fighter Zara stood in what had once been a Dominion command center. Now it was being converted into a school for young Zephyrians who had never learned their own history. "Tell me again about the human message," said a small child who had been born under Dominion rule. "The humans sent a signal across the galaxy," Zara explained patiently. "They showed us that the Dominion could be defeated. They gave us hope. Will the humans come here to rule us?" Another child asked. "No," Zara said firmly. "The humans fight for freedom, not conquest. They want us to rule ourselves." Back on the Terra Shield, Captain Norrison was ending his meeting with the Zephyrian delegation when Amy approached with a concerned expression. "Captain, we're getting reports of a new contact. Unknown ships have entered the outer system." Jake felt his stomach tighten. "Dominion? No, sir. The energy signatures are completely different, and they're broadcasting a message." In the communications center, the main screen showed a new type of alien vessel. It was sleek and silver, with elegant curves that suggested advanced technology. The being that appeared on screen was humanoid, but clearly not human, with pale green skin and large, intelligent eyes. "Greetings," the alien said in accented but clear English. "I am Ambassador Veltar of the Synthesis Republic. We have come to meet the humans who defeated the Dominion Empire." Jake exchanged glances with Amy. This was exactly what they had been preparing for. The defeat of the Dominion had sent a message across the galaxy, and now other powers were taking notice. "Ambassador," Jake replied carefully, "we welcome peaceful contact. How can we help you?" "We represent a coalition of species that has been watching the Dominion's expansion with growing concern," Veltar explained. "We had planned to eventually confront them ourselves, but you acted first. We wish to discuss mutual cooperation." Amy leaned close to Jake. "Initial scans show at least 50 ships in their fleet, all advanced designs." Jake nodded. This was the new reality. Humanity was no longer alone in the galaxy, and they were attracting attention from all sides. "We'd be happy to arrange a formal meeting," Jake said. "I'll need to coordinate with our government." "Of course," Veltar replied. We will wait in this system for your response. And Captain Morrison? Yes? We were impressed by your species' response to the Dominion ultimatum. That's pretty cute. Has become something of a legend in our space. After the transmission ended, Jake found himself laughing. I guess we're famous. More than famous, Amy said. We're setting the standard for how free species deal with bullies. On Earth, President Turner was preparing for another press conference. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of diplomatic activity, military reorganization, and social change. Humanity had gone from being an isolated species to being the leaders of a galactic alliance. Madam President, her chief of staff said, the reporters are ready. Turner walked to the podium in the White House press room. The questions came quickly. As they always did, Madam President, how do you respond to critics who say humanity has become too militaristic? I would say that we're not militaristic, Turner replied. We're prepared. There's a difference between wanting to fight and being ready to fight when necessary. What about the cost of maintaining our new military capabilities? The cost of freedom is always high, Turner said, but the cost of slavery is higher. Ask the Zephyrians, or the Kepler colonists, or any of the other species that lived under Dominion rule. Are you concerned about other potential threats? Turner paused, thinking about the Synthesis Republic ships waiting in the outer system. I'm concerned about complacency. The Dominion was defeated because we were prepared for them specifically. We can't assume that the next threat will be the same. Back on the Terrashield, Jake was preparing for his shift change when he received an unexpected visitor. Colonel Ryan Murphy, the intelligence operative who had spent years working behind enemy lines, had arrived for a briefing. Captain, Ryan said, I wanted to thank you personally. Your crew's performance during the battle was exceptional. We just did our jobs, Jake replied. Though I'm still learning what our jobs actually were, Ryan smiled. That's the beauty of the system. Everyone did their real job, but they also did something more. The miner who was actually mining was also preparing weapons. A farmer who was actually farming was also building defenses. The station commander who was actually monitoring space was also commanding a fortress. What happens now? Jake asked. Do we keep pretending to be civilians? No, Ryan said. The time for hiding is over. We're openly what we always were, protectors of human freedom. And now we're protectors of galactic freedom, too. As the months passed, the galaxy continued to change. The Liberation Coalition grew to include more species. Trade routes opened between worlds that had been isolated for centuries. New technologies were shared freely among member species, but perhaps the most important change was in attitude. The Dominion had ruled through fear, convincing species that resistance was impossible. Humanity had proven that wrong with 3 simple words, and the preparation to back them up. Captain Morrison stood on his observation deck, watching ships from a dozen different species dock at the Terrashield. The station had become a symbol of the new galaxy, a place where free beings could meet, trade, and plan for the future. Captain, Ami said, joining him as she often did, we're receiving another diplomatic request, this time from the Andromedan Trade Federation. Jake nodded. Schedule a meeting. And Amy? Yes, sir? Make sure our guests understand that we're always ready to defend freedom, but we're also ready to help build something better. As the stars wheeled overhead, humanity took its place not as conquerors, but as guardians of a new age. The ultimatum had been met with 3 words, but those words had changed everything. In a galax,